We'll call to order the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology for a hearing on cybersecurity, the pivotal role of communications networks. I want to thank our witnesses for being here this morning. We look forward to your testimony and are very appreciative of your taking the time to be here to help educate us so we can do the right thing in terms of assisting you all protect the security networks or the cyber networks. Back in October, the House Republican Cybersecurity Task Force, appointed by the Speaker, recommended that the committees of jurisdiction review cybersecurity issues. This subcommittee has embarked on a series of hearings to heed that call and to get a complete picture of the cybersecurity challenges that our nation faces. In our February 8th hearing, we examined threats to communications networks and the concerns of the private sector security firms helping to secure those communications networks. That hearing provided us with valuable information and even some potential solutions. This hearing continues our subcommittee's review of cybersecurity issues with a focus on the steps that network operators have taken to secure their networks and any recommendations that you all might have on how Congress can actually help in those efforts. As we heard in the February 8th hearing, threats to communications networks have come a long way in a very short period of time. Before coming to Congress, I spent 22 years as a radio broadcaster, and as a small business person, I had to worry about securing our own communications network. But those were simpler times. In modern communications networks of all types, cybersecurity has become a pressing concern. In our February 8th hearing, we had a dizzying array of new cybersecurity threats discussed, like supply chain vulnerabilities, botnets, and domain name system spoofing. On the brighter side, we were also told during that hearing about several potential solutions to make communications networks more secure. This is why I've asked a number of my colleagues on the subcommittee to serve as the Communications and Technology Cybersecurity Working Group. The working group is a bipartisan team of 6 subcommittee members led by Subcommittee Vice Chair Lee Terry and Subcommittee Ranking Member Anna Eshoo. And we'll look into some of these potential solutions and the legal and regulatory impediments to securing communications networks against cyber threats. With an eye toward incentive-based approaches, the working group looks to facilitate communication among private sector companies and the public sector on a variety of topics, including DNSSEC adoption, supply chain risk management, and a voluntary code of conduct and best practices for network operators. Now, in this hearing, we're privileged to have 5 witnesses that represent parts of the commercial network to help guide us through the complex cybersecurity issues that you each face. Network operators own, maintain, and operate most of the infrastructure that makes up our communications networks. Their management of the wires, the towers, the base stations, the servers, and the wireless handsets that are integral parts of communications networks put these companies on the front lines of cybersecurity. I want to know what cybersecurity services and educational initiatives are being aimed at your consumers. What steps are being taken to secure the core components that make up our communications networks? And what affirmative steps network operators have taken to secure the supply chain and to prevent cyber attacks? I'd also expect to hear what you think the appropriate role of the federal government is to combat cyber threats. Are federal laws and regulations helping or hindering information sharing? Are there cybersecurity solutions that your companies have identified that would prevent cyber attacks, but would run afoul of existing laws? How can the federal government incent network operators and other members of the private sector to invest and innovate in the cybersecurity arena? And coming off of our prior hearing on February 8th, how do we make sure that we don't put things in statute that cause misallocation of your capital and make you less nimble in this extraordinary cyber threat environment? So I look forward to your testimony today. I would yield time to Ms. Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to all of you, and we're deeply appreciative of your time for being here. I think one of the things that
could you get a little closer to your microphone?
I certainly can. I am a mother. I can always talk louder. That's right. The GAO report that mentioned we've seen a 650% growth in cyber attacks over the past 5 years. I think that that caused a lot of people to, sit up and take note of what might be happening out there, because you look at the attacks, you look at what that equates to an effect on the economy. Chairman Bonomack and I are working on introducing a bill, the cybersecurity bill, here in the House, similar to Secure IT from the Senate. And I think the concepts we're viewing are not to be overly prescriptive and to kind of work off the first principle of do no harm and have a good broad conversation in this. I'd love to hear you all talk a little bit about government networks and the importance you think and responsibility you think government has in securing its own networks and systems. And then would love to also hear a little bit from you about incentive-based security and how we approach that. With that, I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady for her comments, and now recognize my friend from California, Ms. Eshoo, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to all of the witnesses, and thank you for being here today. As the title of today's hearing suggests, our communications networks are part of the backbone of our nation's critical infrastructure. From electricity generation to financial services and transportation, we depend on our communications networks for nearly all aspects of our daily lives. Yet, as was highlighted during our first cybersecurity hearing, our networks remain vulnerable to attack. In particular, there are 3 areas I'd like to hear more about from our witnesses today. First, as we discussed in last month's hearing, the FCC chairman is currently proposing a voluntary ISP code of conduct as a way to alert consumers when a botnet or other malware infection is discovered. So today's witnesses will be on the front line in ensuring such best practices are effectively implemented, and obviously I think that you're going to talk about that, and I look forward to it. Second, I'd like to hear more about your views on the supply chain security. I continue to have really grave concerns, and stemming from my 8 years that I just recently completed at the House Intelligence Committee, about the implications of foreign-controlled telecommunications infrastructure companies providing equipment to the U.S. market. In 2010, I wrote to the FCC chairman asking for a better understanding of the FCC's authority to address these challenges and what kind of transparency requirements should be placed on companies seeking to sell telecommunications infrastructure equipment to U.S. network providers. Third, I'd like to learn more about any unique challenges in securing mobile networks. As more data is transmitted wirelessly, we need to look closely at how these networks are secured to ensure they don't become the entryway to the broader network. So today's hearing is an important aspect of our subcommittee's work on cybersecurity. Again, I want to thank each one of our witnesses for being willing to testify today, to be instructive to us. And I want to thank the chairman for the spirit of cooperation around this issue. Usually, there are some Democratic witnesses that are called and Republican witnesses. That's not the case today. So this is something that rises above that, and I look forward to working with the entire committee so that we not only better understand the cybersecurity challenges facing communications networks, but what steps we can take to secure them and thereby strengthen the country. So let's see. I'd like to yield the remaining, my remaining time to Representative Matsui.
Thank you, Ranking Member Eshoo, for yielding me time. Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding today's hearing, and I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. There's no doubt the cyber attacks are real and continue to pose significant threats to several aspects of our economy. And Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased that you and Ranking Member Eshoo formed a bipartisan cyber working group so that we can appropriately explore our subcommittee's interests to enhance our nation's efforts against a cyber attack. There are a variety of issues that we may explore. Communications networks are one of the many areas that our nation must protect and ensure safety and soundness. Advancing IP-based technologies in public safety communications heighten the concerns for cybersecurity. It will be important that data is protected from a PC or a cell phone in transit to cloud storage, particularly as more and more Americans send personal information to the cloud. I also believe that our subcommittee will have the ability to further promote information sharing on cyber threats. Securing the supply chain will be of high importance so that tech components remain secure through their manufacturing and distribution processes. Among others, I believe that R&D incentives could encourage industry to explore ways to better address and defend against malware and botnets. Again, I thank the chairman for holding today's hearing. I look forward to working with my colleagues on ways that this subcommittee can encourage greater protection against cyber threats. I thank the witness for appearing today. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank the gentlelady for her comments. I'll now recognize the vice chairman of the committee, Mr. Terry, for opening comments.
Thank you, Chairman. And let me start by saying that I believe that most of my colleagues on this committee share my optimism that a collaborative, active cyber defense capability is actually achievable. There might be a few differences in opinion on what needs to be done to reach this goal, but through the bipartisan conversations, like those taking place in the working group and public hearings like this, we're getting closer. In reading through the written testimony provided by today's witnesses, I noticed a common thread throughout. As Mr. Amoroso eloquently says, quote, "Quite simply, innovation is inconsistent with standardization." I agree wholeheartedly with our witness, and in my opinion, I find this to be the most vital guiding principle in considering how to enhance our nation's cybersecurity. In fact, as I continue to dig deeper on this issue, I become more convinced that any sort of legislative effort to provide overbroad regulation or certification regimes will surely come with unintended consequences. Instead, ISPs should have the flexibility to respond to real-time security threats in a manner that minimizes delay and maximizes their ability to innovate as they strive to protect their consumers and their network. A couple of things I believe that we can do to help reach the goal of collaborative, active cyber defense capability are: one, remove the current barriers in place that prevent communication networks from sharing cyber threat information with the government agencies as also with the private sector entities. Provide adequate liability protection in order for the sharing of cyber threat information is second. Again, I thank our witnesses for joining us today, and shall I yield to Mr. Stearns?
I thank my colleague. I think the consistent message from our witnesses today is that the private sector has very strong commercial incentives to invest in and maintain robust cybersecurity. In fact, each of our witnesses today has described unique and thorough approaches to protecting their own networks. These examples demonstrate that one-size-fits-all legislation is not the appropriate solution to cybersecurity threats. Moreover, because these threats change every day, industry must be provided the flexibility to respond quickly to an attack. Therefore, I believe that prescriptive, top-down government mandates are not only unnecessary, but they simply will not work. Instead, government should seek to improve information sharing and consumer education. We also should work to eliminate outdated regulations that have created unintentional barriers towards ensuring the security of our networks. So I look forward to our witnesses today, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this great hearing.
Are there any other members seeking time on our side? If not, gentleman yields back his time, and I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman, for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I welcome our witnesses as well. I'm pleased the subcommittee is looking at this issue of cybersecurity. This is our second hearing. Every week we learn of a new cyber breach of vulnerability, so it's vital that we're paying attention to this question. Like the smart grid, which was the topic of our last hearing by the subcommittee, it was a subcommittee on oversight and investigations. Communications networks are highly vulnerable to cyber attack. The potential for severe disruptions are high because communications networks are the common thread to all critical infrastructure sectors. In fact, the public safety legislation that was just signed into law exemplifies these concerns. Under the new law, first responders will be relying on broadband communications networks to secure the safety of life and property. That will strengthen their ability to protect the public, but only if the networks are protected from cyber attacks. Today, I look forward to continuing our discussion of the security threats faced by mobile devices and the proper role for this subcommittee in ensuring cybersecurity. Our witnesses today represent a broad cross-section of Internet service providers, as well as a handset manufacturer. This should further help our understanding of what risks threaten communications networks, what companies are doing to mitigate these risks, and what the subcommittee might do to assist you in these efforts. I believe the federal government has an important role to play in ensuring the cybersecurity of the nation's communications network. One important federal role is developing practices that will keep the Internet safe. The FCC's upcoming release of its Cyber Best Practices Report, developed by the well-regarded Communications Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council, such a long name that is reduced to CISRIC, will provide valuable guidance to industry and our subcommittee. I understand the chairman is planning a third hearing with government agencies. I commend him for this series of hearings and look forward to what our witnesses have to tell us. And finally, I want to join in thanking you, Mr. Chairman, for organizing a bipartisan working group to study cyber threats and inform the subcommittee of its findings. This is a good opportunity for subcommittee members and staff to work together on an issue of common concern. I look forward to hearing back from the working group and exploring with the subcommittee potential further actions. Thank you for the hearing. Thank all the witnesses for being here. I look forward to the testimony. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. I thank you for your comments. We have a lot of big brains on this committee, and we're going to need them all to protect America. So thank you for agreeing, the members who have agreed to serve on that working group. Gentlemen, we're delighted to have you here today. We'll start with Mr. Livingood. We appreciate your being here, and Vice President, Internet Systems Engineering from Comcast Corporation. Thank you for being here, and just a friendly reminder, being old radio guys, pull these microphones very close and make sure the button's lit, and you'll be good to go.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Eshoo, and members of this subcommittee for inviting me to discuss some of the work that Comcast is doing to protect consumers in cyberspace. We appreciate the subcommittee's interest in this issue and its willingness to hear the perspective of someone like me, an engineer working on cybersecurity and other technical Internet issues every day. I serve as Vice President of Internet Systems Engineering at Comcast, and I'm the engineering leader in charge of our residential high-speed Internet service. I currently serve on the FCC, on an FCC CISRIC working group, on ICANN's Security and Stability Advisory Committee, on the Broadband Internet Technical Advisory Group, and am a member of the Board of Trustees of the Internet Society. I'm also an active contributor of the Internet Engineering Task Force, or IETF. At Comcast, we take cybersecurity issues seriously, and we know that our customers are very concerned about security. We strive to provide them with the best, fastest, and most secure Internet service possible, and our engineering team devotes significant time, energy, and investment to constantly update and refine our cybersecurity efforts. One such threat that we focused on comes from malicious software called a bot. Bots run on an end user's computer without their knowledge and are controlled remotely. Bots are used to conduct identity and credit card theft, denial of service attacks, steal usernames and passwords, and send spam. It's important to understand that a person need not consciously do something like downloading an app to become infected. Sometimes they can be infected just by visiting a website. To counter bots, we developed a system called Constant Guard. This customer-facing system first detects botnet traffic, notifies end users of infection, such as sending them alerts in their web browser, and provides them with tools to remove those infections. Another area of threat is to the domain name system, which is a foundational and extraordinarily important and critical part of the Internet. The domain name system, or DNS for short, is responsible for basically translating names like Comcast.com into IP addresses, which are the addresses used to connect and route traffic across the Internet. So it's extremely important. But a vulnerability in the DNS can permit an attacker to inject a fake answer into the DNS. An attacker, for example, can then direct traffic destined to a site, such as a banking website, to computers that they control, perhaps to collect login and financial information, but the address in the user's web browser still appears correct. The long-term fix is to implement DNS security extensions, or DNSSEC for short. This involves someone doing two things. First, cryptographically signing the domain names that they own, and then internet service providers validating those signatures before connecting a user to that site. This is basically akin to your bank keeping your signature on file and checking a signature on your check against that before cashing your check. It's important to note that DNSSEC was developed via an international multi-stakeholder process at the IETF and will require adoption across the entire ecosystem, such as by banks, web browsers, software companies, and cloud services, not just ISPs. I'm pleased to report that, as part of Constant Guard, Comcast was the first ISP in the U.S. to fully deploy DNSSEC in January. But it's important to understand that no open and massively interconnected network can ever be completely and totally secure. While there is no perfect solution to security, that does not mean that there are no good solutions. So our focus has been quite simply to roll up our sleeves and get to work, chipping away at the security threats day in and day out, quickly learning and adapting. We're working within the industry and on a global basis to combat the key threats and to protect our customers the best that we can, and also to help them protect themselves. There are powerful incentives to take strong and effective measures to ensure network security and safety. Our consumers want assurance that the networks that they are using are safe and secure, and we have strong reasons, therefore, to invest capital and resources into cybersecurity safeguards. The same is, of course, true for other network providers. We all have powerful incentives to take actions necessary to secure our substantial investments in our networks. Policymakers can help these efforts by removing legal uncertainties that can inhibit collaboration, while preserving and strengthening this flexibility that providers have to develop the best solutions for each of our networks. As one of the members said a moment ago, there is no one-size-fits-all solution, so flexibility is key, and it's important because the threats change as rapidly as they do. Flexibility will help to ensure that we can continue to focus on security and innovation rather than compliance and regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your comments, and we'll be back to you with some questions on the specifics of what those uncertainties are in the law. We're now delighted to have Dr. Edward Amoroso with us. He is the Chief Security Officer for AT&T Services Incorporated. Doctor, we're glad to have you here, and we look forward to your comments.
Great, thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Ed Amoroso. I've spent my entire adult life in cybersecurity. In fact, even as a teenager, my dad was a computer scientist, so I was logging on to ARPANET when I was a little kid. So I've been in and around this forever. I started work at Bell Laboratories and found that I was actually a pretty good hacker, and have been doing that ever since, and now I'm the Chief Security Officer. So I kind of come at this with a very practical perspective on threat. There's three things I want to share with you that I think are observations that might help you as you develop legislation, and they are based on empirical day-to-day, dealings with security issues with our mobility network and our wireline network and the entire Fortune 1000 and lots of different countries we deal with. So I do that all day long, and I wanted to share it. And the first one's about innovation. We are being out-innovated by our adversaries. It's basically the case. I mean, I don't know if you've ever bought a piece of furniture and taken it home and admired the handiwork on the furniture. That's what we do with malware that's being developed by adversaries. It's so good and so well crafted that we marvel at how far the adversary has come. These are not script kiddies doing dopey things, and these are pretty good. I don't know if any of you watched 60 Minutes. You saw the Stuxnet piece. That is an incredible piece of computer science, that worm. So I think we need to recognize that whatever we do collectively as a nation, we need to figure out a way to incent companies and and universities and government agencies to innovate in this area. If we don't, we're going to be in trouble, because I will tell you, and I bet everybody up at the panel here would agree with me, the best state-of-the-art security protections that any one of us can put in place will not stop a determined adversary in 2012. That is a fact. So we need to do something to get ahead of that, and the way you do something is you innovate. You need to do something to get ahead of it. And part of the problem with sort of prescripting an answer to everyone, hey, we're all going to do the following, is it would be like every NBA team publishing their defense and saying, all right, this is what we're going to do. Guess what? You think the adversaries don't read your legislation? You think they don't look and see what we're all going to do? I mean, then you lay it out and you say, okay, I will step around these things that you're doing. I mean, that's just a practical issue in cybersecurity. This is not, you know, the kind of thing where, you know, we can all kind of do common sense stuff and it will fix it. There's a million things in our lives where if we all go back to the basics and do a set of common sense things, it'll make things better. We all live our lives that way. Cybersecurity doesn't work that way. We're dealing with an adversary. So the first issue is innovation. The second is infrastructure. And I think everybody also at this table would agree that complexity in infrastructure is the biggest problem for cybersecurity. When things get way too complicated, we can't keep track of it. It becomes almost impossible to protect something that has become so big and complicated that you can't get your arms around it. And part of the problem with things like DNSSEC and others, which clearly have benefit, I mean, I certainly agree with a lot of the points that were made, but they add complexity. Like the way to think of DNSSEC is, you know, when you do a commercial and at the end you say, I am such and such and I approve this commercial, that's DNSSEC. I mean, it's essentially the server attesting to the fact that here's a signature that I am who I am. But if somebody's breaking into and owns that server, the signature is meaningless. It doesn't do any good. And I would say empirically, I see a lot more break-ins to DNS servers than forged different types of protocol responses and so on. So I think we need to keep in mind as we develop legislation that when we add complexity, when you add things that we need to keep track of, do this, do that, overlay this, add this new thing, add that new thing, the complexity can be very stifling. You know, when DNSSEC was first proposed, decades ago, right? This is not something that was dreamed up last week. We've been working on adding cryptography to internet protocols forever, and the reason we don't have them today is because they're unbelievably complicated to run. They do add some benefit, but they have side effects. It'd be like bringing your, like a senior citizen to the doctor with 5 ailments, and the doctor says, well, I'm going to give you medicine for one of them, but it has side effects. That's DNSSEC. It does have benefit, it has side effects, it doesn't fix everything. So that's the second. The third and last issue I want to raise is software. At the root of every cyber attack, every problem I've ever dealt with in my entire career is bad software. And I think that it needs to be addressed. The discipline of software engineering, the profession of writing software is one that is a complete mess right now. And I'm a professor at Stevens Institute of Technology. I've been teaching in the computer science department there for 22 years. I teach software engineering, teach computer security, that kind of thing, so maybe you can blame me. But the bottom line is that youngsters and even professionals today cannot write a non-trivial piece of software that is bug-free. And those bugs are the way our adversaries get into our companies. We open up websites because we have no choice. What, are we going to close the website down? It's there, and the software powering that has vulnerabilities we don't know about. I bought it, I install it, I test it, everything's great, but some adversary finds an open door that I don't know about, that the manufacturer doesn't know about, and they dance right in. Bad software is a fundamental problem here, and I think it needs to be addressed probably through the educational system. Thanks.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments, and we'll be back to you with questions as well. Now joined by Mr. David Mahan, Chief Security Officer for CenturyLink. Thank you for being here. We look forward to your comments. And if you can pull that microphone real close to you and make sure it's on.
Opportunity to testify.
Excuse me, is your microphone on?
Yeah, we're not we're having trouble hearing you. Is that light lit up there? There we go. And you really have to get really close. Just saying.
Chairman Walden, Ranking Member Eshoo, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today on this important topic. CenturyLink, a Tier 1 backbone provider, provides communication services to over 14 million homes and businesses in more than 37 states and around the world. Our services include voice, broadband, video entertainment, and data, as well as fiber backhaul, cloud computing, and managed security solutions. Our customers range from the most basic voice and internet customers to the largest Fortune 500 companies and large government agencies. As Vice President and Chief Security Officer for CenturyLink, I am responsible for all corporate security functions, including information security. Before joining CenturyLink, I worked for over 30 years with the FBI and was responsible for investigative teams and programs related to targeted attacks on the internet, computer systems, and networks exploited by terrorist organizations, criminal and intelligence operations of foreign governments, white-collar crime investigations, and crisis management. The cyber threat is real and serious. Our networks and those of our customers are the targets of thousands of cybersecurity events daily, from simple port scans probing network defenses to sophisticated attacks. CenturyLink and our customers invest significant resources and ongoing efforts to keep those assets secure. CenturyLink uses an overarching governance, risk, and compliance framework to ensure cybersecurity threats are addressed enterprise-wide. As stewards of the internet infrastructure, CenturyLink's programs on cybersecurity fall into several general categories: protecting the customer, protecting our core networks, and providing managed cybersecurity and secure communication services. We have worked extensively with our industry peers, partners in government, and other stakeholders to strengthen our collective defenses against cyber attacks. From our CEO's participation on the President's National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee, to my securities team's participation in key organizations such as DHS's Communications Sector Coordinating Council and the FBI's Domestic Security Alliance Council, we conduct risk assessments, information sharing, incident response planning, and participate in government-sponsored cybersecurity exercises. In addition, CenturyLink CEO Glenn Post chairs the FCC's Communications, Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council, which is working on voluntary best practices for botnet remediation, domain name system security, internet route hijacking, and other emerging issues unique to the communications industry. More can and should be done, but carefully. Public-private partnerships have yielded significant progress in the last few years by building a framework of collective defense and cooperation and helping us understand the cyber threat. As many of you have pointed out, we are entering into a new era of cybersecurity threats where our adversaries have become more sophisticated and determined, and the need to collectively step up our game is more acute. We are particularly encouraged by legislation like H.R. 3523, the Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protection Act, and similar provisions in Senate bills that could clarify and enhance cyber-related public-private information sharing. As communication providers, we see a number of areas where congressional action can make valuable improvements to our nation's cybersecurity posture, such as improving information sharing, market-based incentives and gap analysis, improving the federal government's cybersecurity posture, and expanded research and development. Shifting to a mandated-based approach would be counterproductive. We strongly caution against a traditional regulatory approach based on government mandates or performance requirements. Because our network is the one central asset of our business, CenturyLink and our industry peers already have the strongest commercial incentives to invest in and maintain robust cybersecurity. There is neither a lack of will nor a lack of commitment to do this among the major communications providers. At its best, Cybersecurity is a dynamic, constantly evolving challenge, best done in a collaborative partnership. At its worst, cybersecurity can devolve into a checklist exercise and diverts resources away from effective protections into expensive compliance measures that may be already outdated by the time they are implemented. We have the most knowledge of our network, systems, and databases, and we understand the most effective and efficient ways to protect these assets. We commend the members of the Energy and Commerce Committee for their interest in improving the nation's cybersecurity and for the deliberative process the committee is undertaking to find the right mix of incentives and elimination of legal barriers. CenturyLink has strived to be a constructive partner in this effort, and we will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your testimony. And now we'll move to Mr. John Olson, Senior Vice President and Chief Security Officer for Metro PCS Communications. Welcome, and we look forward to your
Thank you,
comment.
Chairman Walden and Ranking Member Eshoo. It is an honor to appear before you and your colleagues today. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer for Metro PCS Communications. I have nearly 30 years of IT experience, and I am responsible for our IT networks. Metro PCS is a leading provider of unlimited wireless communication services for a flat rate with no annual contract. We sell our services through our own retail stores and independent Metro PCS dealers to retail consumers and do not sell through business-to-business sales channels or to the government. Our communications networks use 4 well-known and established network vendors: Alcatel-Lucent, Ericsson, Cisco, and Samsung. We also purchase handsets from well-known and established vendors. These vendors are not our primary network vendors, which mitigates the risk that an embedded handset threat is able to exploit vulnerabilities in our network. Our communications networks utilize security measures similar to other carriers. We've also adopted measures both physical and logical to protect these networks. We have 4 IT networks which are critically important to our business. As we will discuss in more detail, we have voluntarily undertaken a number of cybersecurity measures to protect our IT networks, both physical and logical. Security of these critical networks is very important to Metro PCS. We maintain a comprehensive, holistic, risk-based information security program built on industry best practices covering people, process, and technology. We use a combination of hardware, software, and services. Our security program directives are driven by a formal governance function and include, among other things, centralized policy management, security awareness, training, internal and third-party monitoring, physical protection, threat identification, and vulnerability management, as well as intrusion prevention. We are particularly focused on security at the perimeter of our IT networks and use multi-level security technologies to prevent unauthorized access to our IT networks from both inside and outside our company. We conduct, and we have third-party vendors conduct, regular network security audits and penetration tests, and have standardized on a single provider for all network equipment. Further, our IT networks are broken up into segments with firewalls between critical segments. Our 24/7 monitoring efforts, which are augmented by our cybersecurity partners, can generate hundreds of thousands of potential cyber threat alerts a day, but result in just a handful of real threats, which we address immediately. While we cannot say definitely we have never had a cyber intrusion, we are not aware of any significant cyber intrusions or cyber attacks that have been successful at disrupting our IT or communication networks. In addition, we have also adopted a number of other measures to protect our customer information, such as encrypting hard drives, installing virus and malware software, and for remote access requiring 2-factor authentication. We also conduct background checks, segregate duties of personnel, and log all access and changes to critical systems. Metro PCS has also implemented numerous physical security measures such as card key and biometric access. Our staff also maintains vendor-specific and industry-recognized certifications and regularly participates in vendor-sponsored symposiums, industry summits, and conferences. We are involved in these groups not because we are required to, but because they are a valuable source of information and best practices. Metro PCS does not believe that regulation is required or warranted at this time, particularly for carriers that do not provide services to government or local public safety organizations. Carriers are already well incented to protect their networks, and this is particularly true for month-to-month service providers like Metro PCS. If we do not provide the level of protection our customers want or demand, they can terminate service without penalty and activate service with a competitor. Governmental regulations and private sector certifications such as PCI also force providers to invest in the appropriate tools and practices to detect and deter cyber threats. Market forces are better suited to respond to constantly changing cyber threats. If regulations are considered, Metro PCS urges that these requirements be flexible and tailored to the threat. Regulatory compliance can be particularly burdensome for carriers who compete by providing an affordably priced, differentiated service for consumers. Unfortunately, even voluntary obligations can evolve into a mandate on industry. We support voluntary industry efforts, industry standard bodies, enhanced governmental consumer education, and the FCC's cybersecurity stakeholder efforts, along with government sharing of cyber threat intelligence, including a national central clearinghouse. Finally, no carrier should be liable for using such information. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. We appreciate your comments today, and we'll be back at you with questions as well. Now we'll turn to our final witness on the panel this morning, Mr. Scott Totsky, Senior Vice President, BlackBerry Security Group Research in Motion, RIM. Thank you for being here, and look forward
Chairman
to
Walden, Ranking Member Eshoo, members of the subcommittee, thank you very much. My name is Scott Totsky. I'm the Senior Vice President of BlackBerry Security at Research in Motion, and I am pleased to be here to talk to you on the topic of cybersecurity. RIM revolutionized the mobile industry when we introduced the BlackBerry in 1999, and today our products and services are used by millions of customers around the world. There are more than 630 carriers and distribution partners in 175 countries that offer BlackBerry products and services to our customers. More than 90% of the Fortune 500 customers are BlackBerry customers today, and we have a long-standing relationship with the U.S. federal government, including Congress, the Department of Defense, and the Department of Homeland Security. Mobile communications face similar security risks as non-mobile communications. Several of the same types of threats and attack techniques that have existed in traditional computing platforms can impact smart users today, and as the power, ubiquity, and computing capabilities of smartphones have increased over the last few years, the threat matrix continues to evolve exponentially. Most users have yet to realize that the applicability of both the existing and emerging threats to what is essentially a smaller and more mobile computing platform that they already have at their home or office. An effective and comprehensive mobile security solution must therefore provide protection by preventing unauthorized access to the smartphone and its data, to protect the data in transit over the wireless network, and to protect the corporate network using features that are built into the platform. While technology vendors can provide components of these solutions, it is equally important that as a mobile technology industry, we help government, enterprises, and consumers better understand the risks involved with all types of online activities. For our part, RIM focuses on designing secure and efficient solutions for enterprises and consumers. RIM has a history of integrating security features into its products and firmly believes that security technologies are an important foundation for a digital economy. RIM has built security features in that allow for data to be encrypted and protected from unauthorized access, to limit and control access to information on the smartphone by third-party applications, and to remotely erase sensitive information in the case where a phone is lost or stolen. These controls can all be centrally managed by the BlackBerry Enterprise solution, which is designed to give large and small organizations the ability to balance individual and enterprise use of BlackBerry smartphones while protecting the privacy of their corporate and employee information. RIM also believes that there needs to be more focus on security testing and certification that establishes a baseline for technology vendors. Without an established baseline to properly gauge the security of a product or a network, it is difficult to make informed decisions. Vendors that work to certify their mobile solutions through trusted validation programs provide assurances to governments and consumers who would otherwise be unable to verify the security of the claims being made by the vendor. BlackBerry products and solutions have already received more security accreditations globally than any other wireless solution, and our consumers value this level of transparency when it comes to protecting their information. We feel that greater adherence to security standards like FIPS would help the customers better understand their personal and professional investments in protecting their information. Lastly, this panel has raised a number of concerns regarding two extremely important points related to the evolution of security and technology in the mobile industry that I would like to address. The first concern is related to information sharing. While there's increased competition between vendors, there's also an increasing degree of commonality in the components used by many desktop and mobile platforms. This directly translates into an evolving risk of cross-platform vulnerabilities, creating a level of shared risk that increases the need for vendors to work together to responsibly disclose and address these concerns. This also means that programs such as RIM's information sharing program need to fully engage with public sector entities such as the U.S. CERT to ensure timely and bidirectional flow of security information. The second issue raised here is related to supply chain security and the impact it can have on the security and availability of networks. A product that has been modified or created in an unauthorized manner could pose security risks to the customer's information and to the overall posture of RIM's network, our carriers' networks, or our customers' networks. RIM has been working for several years to embed network security elements directly into the silicon of our products and in all aspects of our manufacturing process to ensure that only authentic products are allowed to obtain network services. We believe that this combination of hardware security, operational security in manufacturing, facility security, software security, and network security work together to mitigate many of the concerns about knockoff products or products that have otherwise been tampered with impacting the security of our customers' information. We support the subcommittee's efforts to raise awareness of this wide-reaching impact in respect to supply chain related security issues. Chairman Walden and members of the subcommittee, I would like to thank you again for the opportunity to provide RIM's perspective on these critical issues.
Mr. Toski, thank you very much for your testimony. All of you, thank you very much. We appreciate your being here. I'm going to lead off with questions. So, Dr. Ambroso and Mr. Olson, you say in your testimony that you routinely track threats to your networks. I assume you all do that. How can we facilitate information sharing among network providers of such information while protecting consumers' privacy and companies' competitively sensitive data?
Well, I think the big debate has been between government and industry, right? That's been the big issue. Like if I go to a security conference and some hacker whispers to me that there is a signature that I should be looking at, then I scribble it down, run back to my ops center and put it in place. If a government individual does that, then I can't put that in the network because we'd be operating as a branch of or an agent of the government or something like that. So that seems to me a little silly. Like that's something that probably ought to be addressed.
So that's the kind of specific issue we're trying to drill down to here.
Yeah.
Can you give us something more specific? Where does that show up? Do you know statutorily?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like the United States intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies regularly see different types of signatures that we don't look for. We're not in law enforcement. We're providing service to customers. So we don't chase that sort of thing down. We chase it to the point where we can stop it, and that's it. But like intelligence groups will really dig down deep and see something that we don't. For them to share that, particularly if it's classified or something, is awkward and it's stilted. And I know in my own company, whenever I get involved in something like that, there's more lawyers involved in the discussion than there are people in this room right now. So, you know, it's almost like we're disincented to even bother. So I don't think it's so much whether, you know, between different groups we share, because frankly, we kind of do. The internet wouldn't work if we weren't sharing constantly. We sit in peering centers. It's government.
But are there any prohibitions? If you spot something, if you go to that conference and a hacker says, look for this signature, is that something that, you know, Mr. Olson, Mr. Mahan, and others should be looking for as well on their networks?
I'm sure they do. Yeah.
And then is there a way you can share that information with them, or are there impediments to that kind of sharing?
I mean, we all buy services from a lot of the same companies that do that. You know, we pick companies that do a really great job of that. I buy from 3 or 4 different companies that provide about the same intelligence everybody else is going to get here. It's pretty good, you know, and it's, you know, and they're incented to make sure it's pretty useful because I pay them every month for it.
And do the customers. And so I guess the question then is, there's not a problem sharing information back and forth?
Sometimes there is, right?
Is that a problem we should?
I mean, here's the
we're looking for barriers
here's the canonical example. AT&T had an exclusive on the iPhone for some period of time. So I put a bunch of people down in New York City, PhDs right out of school, and I told them, find ways to filter attacks being aimed at iPhones that will really help our customers. And they worked real hard, and we came up with some. And once other carriers got access to the iPhone, do you really think I'd want to give them the, you know, the fruits of the work that we're doing? Their incentive is to do it as well, and, you know, and compete with us. And I'd like my customers to say, hey, I'm going to stay with AT&T because they're really investing in doing the protection. And our competitors say the same thing, and we innovate that way. That's a case where, you know, it's not necessary for me to share. The market is going to force our competitors to want to catch up, or for me to catch up to somebody else. That's the right balance between, I believe, between all of us. But between government and industry, it should be I think the information sharing should be more free.
Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Olson, do you
Yes,
want to comment on
Mr.
that?
Chairman. In Metro PCS, besides our internal controls and our internal systems, we also have cybersecurity partners, so security monitoring firms that we use to monitor our network and our systems 24 hours a day. Those firms do share information between them, but if I believe I understand your question, there is not a central clearinghouse for that information for the folks that are outside of those security companies to easily share information. So if Mr. Amoroso recognizes a threat or is told about a threat in his network, there isn't a central place where he could notify other companies or other carriers, even in the same industry, that this threat is out there and we should respond to it.
And is there an incentive, because I almost hear a disincentive to do that? If you've done the research, you've identified the threat, you protect your customers, why do you tell some other iPhone company?
I don't know it's a disincentive. Keep in mind that when we advertise or broadcast that there's a threat we're worried about, you're telling the bad guys too, right? I mean, so it is it'd be a little weird to be too open about what you're concerned with. So I kind of like the existing model. I mean, I think that there are companies that do this. We evaluate them, and when the intelligence looks pretty good, we buy it.
All right, my time's expired. We'll turn now to the gentlelady from California, Ms. Eshu.
Thank you to all of the witnesses. Excellent testimony. First to Mr. Livingood, I think it's really terrific that you're the first ISP in North America to fully implement the DNSSEC, as you noted in your testimony. How do we encourage other ISPs to follow your lead? What would be, just quickly, I have a whole series of questions, so
Right.
go
So
as
I think
quickly as
on that
possible.
question regarding DNSSEC adoption by other providers, I think it's important to keep in mind one thing, which is it's not just about network operators. It's about banking sites. It's about other websites, software developers. A lot of people have to implement DNSSEC to make it work in the ecosystem. But specific to network operators, I would say that there's actually already a lot of that interaction going on already. You know, one of the beautiful things about the way that the internet has worked and is successful is there are a lot of these multi-stakeholder, consensus-based organizations that groups get involved in. One of them, in fact, happens to be one of the CISRIC working groups that I'm on, and they'll be coming out with a recommendation soon, and a number of our companies participate in that.
When will that be?
I think that it's due today, the recommendation.
good.
So I think the CISRIC
You
is
never
voting
know
on it
on
soon.
government time, so
yeah,
that's
it's
why,
relevant.
yeah. Congress has an extensive network to ensure the security of our mobile devices and the network that they run on. I experienced this firsthand last year when I traveled abroad as part of a congressional delegation, and my device became infected during the trip. And because of the device never left me. I mean, I'd practically slept with the thing under my pillow. It never was out of my purse. It was never left in a hotel, but nonetheless, it was infected. The good news is because of the proactive measures in place, the threat was detected prior to being reactivated in the house network. So as a company, what steps do you take to ensure that your customers, particularly those in smaller organizations, adhere to the same proactive security measures? And I guess my question is to Mr. Totsky, to Dr. Amoroso. I love your name, Amoroso. And Mr. Olson.
Sure. Thank you, Congresswoman. I'll go first. I mean, we provide a comprehensive list of guidelines for configuration of the device. So our administrators have white papers and information they can access on the website. And our goal is to make sure that your administrator, your IT organization that looks after your device, if it's a BlackBerry device, has full control over that device at all times. So there's a comprehensive set of policies, more than 500 of them, that an administrator can send to control all aspects of the platform, including preventing access to information or disallowing even the installation of software on the device. So we try and do that, as I think it will be a common thread here. There is a lot of education in this industry. Security is a complex set of decision-making things that we have to do on a daily basis, and a lot of risk that is really difficult for people to understand. We're trying to offer as much transparency and help to our customers through publication of standards and best practices and forums like this.
as I understand, one way to prevent potential botnet activity is to isolate and block IP addresses that pose a threat. Do you all have the technology to do this today? And if so, has it been effective?
I can comment. I mean, we had technology to block, but it doesn't work. So, you know, we can certainly,
There you go.
and we do try.
Mm-hmm.
We try real hard. Botnets are all of your PCs being infected. That's what it is. Like, we've made the mistake in computing of turning every person in this room into a Windows system administrator. That's what you do part-time when you're not, you know, legislating. So that model is wrong, and most of you don't do a very good job of it, nor do I. I bet people on this table, we would shrug and say we probably don't do it well either. So we've distributed the responsibility massively, and that risk
Is that what
spreads
causes
out.
the complexity that you just
Yeah, well, it's
mentioned in your
billions
opening
of
statement?
people around planet Earth with PCs that are improperly protected. So it's a piece of cake to build a botnet. We watch botnets, you know, have new ones every day, ones that are 50,000, 100,000 seat botnets we don't even bother naming. We just say, oh, there's another one. We track them and just try to contain it. So it's not a matter of blocking the IP addresses, because we'd be blocking you. You probably wouldn't like that. Sorry you can't get on the internet today. Why? It looks like you have a botnet. We'd just shut the whole internet down if we did that.
In my opening statement, I mentioned the issue of supply chain and the security that I think really needs to be brought to that. First of all, do you share these concerns about the supply chain? And if so, what do you think would be the appropriate role for us to play in addressing it? I think it's a serious issue. Our telecommunications networks, as we came to more fully appreciate after our country was attacked, was the system that we relied on. We didn't have that. I don't know what we would have done. So I think that, and there are constant things that keep coming up relative to the supply chain. So I welcome any comments on that.
So I'll answer that from a device manufacturer standpoint. And you know, this has been a concern for RIM, you know, for the decade plus that I've been there. We have to understand where we get our components from, where we manufacture the devices. And when we started, it was really easy because we just made everything in our factory and it was all under our control. And as you grow into a global entity, you deal with outsourced manufacturing and kind of distributing that capability around the world with different partners. So it brings into question, you know, are you actually manufacturing the product you think you're making? Are you getting something out that's whole and intact? And we've really focused on understanding what we can do to secure our products in the manufacturing process, as well as the parts that come in. So for some of our strategic vendors, we are actually doing serialization and embedding kind of cryptographic elements in their silicon before it gets to us. And then our manufacturing process goes through a verification of every tool along the line, checking with RIM head office to say, are you allowed to actually perform this operation? And the combination of hardware and software, so the embedded certificates in the silicon, the hardware checking that the software hasn't been tampered with, is used to authenticate the device to get BlackBerry services. So we know that a device hasn't been tampered with and it's been manufactured by RIM and it's intact when you first turn it on. And that authentication protects our network, our carrier partners network, and your networks. And it's that hardware, software, and network layer all working together to ensure the integrity of the BlackBerry services that we provide to our customers.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now turn to the Vice Chair of the committee, Mr. Terry, for questions.
Thank you. And with my 5 minutes and 5 people, I want to ask you all the same question, and that's in regard to the fact that you are the interface. If I want to have an internet experience, I have to hire one of you. So what are you doing to provide me services that'll protect, at least to some extent, from botnets and viruses or attacks to my information in my computer, and we'll start from left to right, my left to right, Mr. Livingood.
Sure, thank you. So I think we all have somewhat similar, capabilities. It's a multi-layered approach. There's not any one thing that's going to solve it. So it's sort of, like an onion. There's lots of layers, and it's everything from intrusion protection that's at the edge of a network to things that provide denial of service attack, mitigation when you see those things, to botnet intelligence systems that detect botnets and start to notify customers. I mentioned that in my opening statement. And then to notify customers. And there are also a number of things that we all do, and we do in particular, to educate customers, to help them understand what things they need to secure in their network, the software they need to manage, gets them the software that they need to secure their network and their computers. So it's a multi-layered approach.
No, that was exactly what we do. Same thing. I mean, I don't know that. There's a lot of different products and product names. I mean, I'll tell you the one thing we don't do, and that's that we didn't sell you the computer. We didn't sell you the operating system that runs on the computer, and we didn't help you select what type of software to put on there. And increasingly, the ISPs are getting dragged into that, and it's a difficult situation because a lot of times people say, "Oh, ISP, I got something wrong with my PC. You guys are sitting off in the cloud somewhere watching. You should figure out how to fix my PC," and that's something that all of us struggle with.
We do all a number of very similar things, I think, in the ISP world, to protect particularly residential customers. I think you've heard of them, the spyware, the antivirus, parental controls. We all have educational and awareness, places on our website, our homepage where you can go to. We have a botnet notification program. In fact, your computer does become a bot on a botnet. We have a method to notify you and then facilitate you cleaning up your home device.
I think there's a lot of commonality in the approaches that we're all taking. One of the distinctions that I mentioned in my opening comments regarding our cybersecurity partner, I think our partners, is really important. These are people that are focused, that their full-time job is cybersecurity. They are looking for threats all the time, and they have hundreds, if not thousands, of customers that are feeding them information, and they are seeing real-time threats go through many companies. So a threat that might hit one company, they're aware of before many of us would see that. So I think that information sharing in that cybersecurity industry is really critical, and it's something that we value.
All right. Ms. Chotsky, you may have already answered this question when you were talking to Ms. Eshu.
Yeah, so certainly the embedded security elements are part of that, but beyond that, we have user and administrator controlled security that lets our users dictate what level of protection they want to put into the platform. And we do have services available to consumers and enterprises that allow for on-device encryption of data, remote backup, remote restore, the ability to remotely lock and wipe a device. So you can deal with this eventuality as a mobile device that's going to be lost or stolen and left in a taxi cab. So we give you the capability out of the box to deal with any of those eventualities.
Good, I appreciate that. I guess the last 47 seconds I'm going to give to Mr. Amoroso. Should the responsibility be on the ISP providers to have a system to detect viruses as they enter into your network before they get to my computer?
If we knew how to do that reliably, I'd been trying to sell you that years ago. It's a very difficult thing to detect viruses and malware. Sometimes we can kind of pick it up, and we do notify, just like the rest of them. I call 100 to 1,000 people every week. The problem is, if I really knew what to tell them, knew exactly how to fix their PC, I'd call everybody. Why just restrict it to the ones I happen to notice have active malware? We'd tell everyone. The problem is, there isn't a person in this room that can tell you how to clean malware off your PC, other than re-image your computer. That's the best we can do.
Can't we just tell you to stop it?
I wish I knew what, here's the reason we can't stop it. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of an encrypted tunnel, but when you visit a website and you see HTTPS, that means there's cryptography between you and the website, and everybody says, oh, that's really secure, you should look for that. The reality is every hacker in the world knows to make sure they're pushing their malware through that encrypted tunnel because none of us can see it. So we can sort of block the website, but they hide the malware in places we can't see. That's where anybody would go. So I'm just saying, when we do pick it up,
fun issue to deal with.
here's what, when we pick up malware, it's the equivalent to somebody falling over and having a heart attack on the table, and we go, oh, that's rapid response to preventive care. That's, you fell over, you had a heart attack, I picked that up. That's easy. It's picking up the stuff that isn't easy, and that's why it's difficult for us to build reliable services that'll detect the malware, because it's hidden. Any hacker would do it that way.
Thanks. Mr. Doyle, you're up next.
I think we ought to just call him Dr. Sunshine, huh? Mr. Tosky, I want to ask you about federal workers. As you might know, the White House is currently working on a national mobility strategy to determine how the employees of the federal government are using their mobile devices. And they're going to decide, for example, whether all agency employees can bring their own devices to work, much like many private sector employees do. Now, we don't, of course, are advocating to prescribe one particular type of phone for everyone to use in the federal government, but what security issues do you foresee that might come up as a result of this if we allow all federal agencies workers to use their own mobile devices? And how do you think device manufacturers can make sure that the data that's on the phone of federal workers, especially in sensitive agencies, remains secure?
Yeah, so as you move to more of a heterogeneous environment where you have bring your own device, or what we call personal liable, individual liable devices, one of the challenges you face is that the security of platforms is going to vary based on the vendor and the posture and the features that they built into that. So getting a consistent view of security and how you're protecting your information is probably one of the issues. There are kind of liability and discovery issues in more of a corporate context. Who owns the information? Who owns the intellectual property if you have to go through any kind of a litigation? Maybe not such a big case in the case of a federal government employee. And then how do you protect the information on the device, which I think is probably one of the more important ones. There is a level of encryption built into BlackBerry to encrypt all of that data at rest, whether that's personal data or government data, and that's one of those can be enforced remotely. But as we look at how we go into a bring your own device scenario, the biggest concern that I have is this lack of a standard bar for protecting information. And what I would be most concerned about is sort of a race to the lowest common denominator. So we have 3 or 4 competing platforms. So in order to allow everything, we're going to reduce our security requirements to the bare minimum, which I think is the wrong thing, especially at the government level.
Thank you. Mr. Livingood, given the concerns outlined by Dr. Sunshine about implementing the DNSSEC, can you outline for us why Comcast made the decision to begin using DNSSEC and whether you think it's had the intended benefits that you hoped it would have?
Sure. Well, the intended benefits is it's a long-term game there. I think one of the challenges with DNSSEC adoption was that you needed some critical mass for people to start signing their names, for people to build software to do that. And we felt like we could play a role in leading the industry and creating that critical mass. So, that's part of the reason that we did it. I think the reason, at root why we did that is when the Kaminsky vulnerability came out in 2008, it fundamentally, scared the heck out of us. If our customers couldn't be sure that when they went to bankofamerica.com, it was that website, that scared us because then, they're less likely to use the internet. They're not going to care as much about higher speed services and so on. And that's incredibly important to us. So to have a way, we all certainly had a short-term fix to that, but to have a long-term fix to that we thought was incredibly important, and DNSSEC appears to be that one. And we're pleased to help lead the way and create that critical mass to help adoption.
Thank you. And just in closing, Dr. Amoroso, I've enjoyed your testimony, and it makes us all realize how much work we all have to do together to face this problem that is certainly there's no easy answer to. But I want to thank all the panelists for your testimony today. It's been very enlightening. I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Doyle, thank you very much. And we'll go now to Mr. Shimkus for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I kind of want to build a little bit on what my friend Mike Doyle mentioned, but I wanted a different perspective. because it's kind of tied, it popped in my mind when you talked about federal workers. Where are you finding your cyber warriors today from? In other words, where are they coming out of? They coming from private universities? They coming out of the military? Briefly, the cutting edge new people who are helping you do this stuff, where are they coming from?
So
Just
I'll-
going,
I
yeah,
can
going
answer
down
that.
real quick. I don't have much
You know, I
time.
think it's a variety of places, and I would say, you know, there's a need for more educational focus, not just in cybersecurity, but ICT generally. But we find people in a variety of ways. Some are former military service members, former law enforcement. Others are just Linux system administrators that are interested in security. Others are, you know, former childhood hackers or something like this, and they're interested in it. So it's a variety of things. They're not.
But is there a college path? Is it? I mean, can you get IT training in the business schools or computer science class? I mean, where are they?
Comment. So I've been teaching at Stevens for 22 years. I teach this semester. If you looked at my class in 1990, you would see something that would look like, you know, typical, you know, college class. I went to Dickinson, Pennsylvania, so, you know, pretty a mix of kids. My class today at Stevens is about 98% foreign nationals, and I've got about 65 in the classroom, and almost all of them have the intention of leaving the country when they complete their master's or PhD because they see bigger opportunities elsewhere. That's just
Well, and that kind of segues, and if you all want to jump in, I can real quick, but that I don't want to forget the aspect of compensation for people entering the private sector versus the government sector. There's this debate on salary compensation. I don't know where it is. I mean, we have the same issues about bringing in the best and the brightest, but if we're not compensating them for what the private market bears, then there's another thing. Anyone want to jump in?
Just on where we source. So there is, you know, certainly out of the education system, out of military and intelligence, we find some people kind of moving into private industry. The most talented guy on my team's a high school dropout. And so I think using kind of the education system as a bar doesn't really help identify the best talent. He would be one of the top recognized kind of hackers and researchers in the world. So it varies. And I don't think you can actually teach somebody to be a hacker. There's a, you know, sort of, if you want to be a researcher in that area, there's an ingrained mentality you're either born with or not. So it's not like I'm teaching somebody a trade like programming and getting to a level of sophistication in developing software. Being an attacker is a much different mindset.
Right. No, thanks. I don't know if I'll get to both of them, but you know, the debate on the Senate side on just, and this is how you provide is, what happens if the federal government requires you to follow a new government security standard? What happens to you? That's the debate on the Senate side legislatively. One has a government-imposed standard. One is really letting you guys fight the battle yourself. So anyone want to jump in?
I'll offer just a brief point. My guess is anything you can write down that you can think of as kind of a best practice, it's already being done here. And the things that we're back at the shop worrying about now are things that are not on your list. Like as an example, we talked about botnets. You know, when I saw the first botnet, remember Y2K? We were building the Y2K White House communication, the fusion center, and we were worried that we were going to get DDoSed for one day. That would be really bad if you were knocked out one day and missed the millennium change. You can't really move that date, right? So we were completely freaked out by botnets then, and we've built, and a lot of people in this room, we've built ways to steer traffic around and fix it. And now we have a service, and it's where we've moved on to the next thing.
Yeah, and let me put a final challenge out because I do agree. How do we incent innovation in this area, which is part of the opening statements? Incentivizing usually means government money here or government tax credits. You know, that's all kind of persona non grata right now in this new world in which we live in. So I would ask you to help us wrap around about this, and maybe it's easing regulatory burdens. Maybe there's things we can do that's not a dollar cents component, but tax credits, things like that. It's very difficult to do in today's environment. I just throw that out. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thanks, gentlemen. And if I, with the committee's indulgence, Doctor, could you just explain DDoSed?
I'm sorry. So that stands for distributed denial of service. Here's how it works. When my voice talks to all of your ears, it's one thing to many ears, and it works great if you're all quiet and you listen, your ears work. But if you could bounce my voice off your ears to him, it would sound like you're all shouting at him, right? My voice to all of your ears, and then you reflect it back. That's a denial of service attack. We hit all your PCs and then tell all your PCs to shout this way. And boom, it all comes, and it sounds like this big attack, and it clogs his pipes and knocks him out. That's how it works.
All right, thank you, Doctor. Now we go to Ms. Matsui.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this is all challenging and frightening at the same time here. And I do appreciate all of your testimony. I want to go into another area here. As we look into develop industry best practices standards for ISPs, should ISPs own cloud services be included as well as other cloud providers? Or do you think because that technology is newer, it could be better for cloud providers to consider forming their own best practices to secure data in the cloud? And like Mr. Mann and Dr. Amoroso to answer that, please. And we don't have much time, so.
Well, first of all, we're already talking to the cloud providers, and some of us, in fact, are cloud providers. So I do think that the conversation is well underway. We're very familiar with the challenges, and if you really think about it, the term cloud is a rather generic term that is probably misunderstood. It can mean a number of different things for a different type of customer. And so therefore, I would say we continue to include them in the conversation as we have everyone else, so to speak, at the table as partners. And the solutions that you're looking for are really going to have to be integrated across a very wide platform.
Okay.
And so therefore, I would say that you would want to keep them in the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
So my mother has a PC at home that at this instant I'm sure is like attacking China or something. It's probably going, because it's not administered properly. Yeah. And she's got, you know, a big tower with Verizon, Fios, the whole thing. She doesn't need that. She'd be much better served to have a cloud provider just take care of all of that for her, and she should just be using some, you know, appliance to hit the internet. The reason she doesn't is because there's software on the PC that she wants to be able to use, hasn't been put in the cloud. So in general, that concept is a more secure concept than my mom trying to do administration. So I think cloud in general is a more secure model than the one we have now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
I'm Dr. Amoroso. Given your expertise in this area, what are the differences between securing wired and wireless communications networks, and how can these differences be accounted for in any type of cybersecurity initiatives?
Well, they're pretty big, right? The differences are significant. You know, if we had 3 hours, I can take you through the whole thing, but I'll give you one example.
Okay.
Remember when, I'm guessing most of you remember when computer security was just, don't put an infected floppy in your computer.
Yes,
Remember
right.
that? I mean, it was like, don't put software in your machine where you don't know where it came from. It seemed like perfectly good common sense, right? What do we do every single day on app stores? You know, we're downloading stuff. I don't know who wrote that. I don't know where it came from, but boy, it sure looks pretty cool. I think I'll download it to my device. That's something we're going to have to address from a security perspective. That's a big difference between wired and wireline.
Okay. I'm also thinking also too that so much of what we do is wireless. So much we do within our own homes are wireless. And yet it's just so easy to do it that most people don't think about it at all. And I'm concerned that we're not thinking as broadly as we should be thinking as far as some of the personal use, and I think it came about here with Mr. Doyle's too, in the government area too. But it's so easy to be carrying, you know, tablets and different cell phones around. And for me, it's the part that's really, to me, quite frightening is that nobody knows what they don't know. And we're looking at you, and you're saying too that there's a lot of things you don't know too. And we look upon you as experts. And I'm hoping that we can build in some incentives here with a sort of a sharing of information that goes beyond some of your commercial type of concerns, because I'm looking ahead to, this is even going to be more and more complicated as we develop more tablets and smartphones and whatever, that we're losing control of the cybersecurity aspect of it. And the software aspect, I think you brought up, Dr. Amoroso, is really very important, the education of that, and whether or not we're actually kind of building our own principles and standards into that too. So that's just a comment, and I really do appreciate your being here, and I think I'm learning more and more every time one of you opens your mouth. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for your comments. We'll go now to Ms. Blackburn for 5 minutes.
Thank you all so much. And I tell you what I think I'm going to do is just ask my questions. Then if you all want to respond or respond in writing, that would be wonderful. First of all, going back to something that Mr. Shimkus said, I would like to hear from each of you, and you can say now or send it to me, what you're seeing as the disturbing trends and what is kind of the next thing out there. I'd like to know that. I'd like to get an idea of how much of your cost of doing business is beginning to center around the cybersecurity issues. In your testimony, several of you have mentioned in one way or another, either in response to the questions or testimony, fear that the federal government could end up being more of an impediment than a facilitator in bolstering some of the cybersecurity efforts. I would like for you to speak to what you are concerned that we might do, and then what we are not doing that we should be doing, and hear from you in that vein. With your consumers, I'd appreciate knowing what you're doing to educate them. I think that one of the things that helps us as we work through the process is being certain that consumers are educated. So if I could get that bit of information, and then when we look at the hacker attacks that are out there, some of the anonymous attacks, some of those, there's one in the news today, or I think there are 5 people that they are bringing forward on charges. What kind of government-imposed performance requirements would help keep pace with some of the technological evolution that you're seeing in these cyber attacks? And if we were to do a government top-down sort of structure to try to deal with cyber enemies, would that be giving a signal to that cyber enemies? Is that kind of too much information for them to be able to work around? So with that, those are the questions that I'd love to hear from you on, the trends, the cost, what we are doing, what we're not doing, dealing with consumers, how you're educating them, and then looking at the attacks, the cautions you would give to us there. And with that, anyone that wants to respond.
Sure, I can go first, and I'll try to be quick so that others can answer. In terms of the positive things that government can do, I think making information sharing easier, there are a number of things there to help. I think that government has a role to play in education, whether that's PSAs or other kinds of education for end users, for citizens. I think there's also an opportunity to help incent or fund additional R&D. I know that NIST and other groups try to do research in security and other internet futures. I think that there's more that can be done there that's important. And in terms of things to be careful of or be aware of, I think it's to be aware of mandates and be careful of mandates. I think we don't want to be focused on checklists and compliance. We want to be focused on innovation and the threats of tomorrow, not sort of the threat today.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, I could just make 2 comments. Several of the questions and comments today mentioned incentives. I can tell you as an IT professional, we are heavily incented to make sure that we're protecting not only our internal resources, but all of our partners that are interconnected with our systems. I think one of the things that is a little scary so far is we monitor all of our customer service channels, our call centers, stores, website, And we're not seeing a lot of requests from our customers concerning their own security of their handsets and devices. So I think education is certainly going to be important. I think there's just not a general awareness in the consumer population how big an issue this is.
Okay.
Maybe a comment more around why it's so difficult to regulate this arena. I think here we've been speaking here rather generically about mobile devices and cybersecurity threats, but it's a much broader problem depending on what category you're looking at. And because there's multiple categories of threat actors, trying to be finding a solution in a prescriptive way is very difficult. If you think about who's coming at you and why they're coming at you, you could have a nation state coming at you for all sorts of reasons. They could be coming at the federal government for military reasons, but that same nation state could be coming after a corporation for intellectual property. Everything from understanding that that intellectual property is not just in a 50,000 corporate environment, it could be in a 50-person law firms that doing your M&A activity for you. So you have that broad landscape if you're looking at nation state. If you're looking at criminal activity, sure, you have what used to be the script kiddie doing something that was relatively harmless, and maybe at best you've hired them today as your network administrator if they grew up. But on the other hand, you have organized crime looking at more broadly the world and how does it make money. You look at the recent FBI investigation on the DNS changer malware that infected hundreds of thousands of computers. Then you can take a look at your Anonymous and others that are more hacktivists trying to make a point. And then you come down to your insider threat and your companies that are doing it to you. So if you think about that landscape and the data that they're after it for sometimes different reasons. When you try to put a regulatory overlay on that, it's very difficult to put us in a position to respond to those kind of four broad categories, and then at the same time make sure we have our checklist compliance programs going. Thank you.
Thank you. Yield back.
Gentlelady's yielding back. Now recognize the gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands, Dr. Christensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I have a couple of questions. Let me begin with Mr. Amoroso. You suggest in your testimony that Congress define the roles of the various executive branch agencies in cybersecurity. Where do you see the FCC as an independent agency playing a role?
Well, I don't think there's an agency right now that's in a good position to come in and solve a problem that we can't solve ourselves. I mean, if it really was a case where you could write out these 5 things that we should all be doing, and for whatever reason, negligence, ignorance, whatever, we're not doing it, then you really do need somebody in government to shake us, you know, into action. The problem is that we don't know what it is that you should be telling us we should be doing. That's why we're pointing to innovation as the key. So it's almost kind of a moot question whether it should be DHS or FCC or whomever, because I'm not really sure what they should be telling us. That's the problem. And, you know, there are some things that, like I sit on CISRIC, you know, and I'm part of the team trying to make recommendations. I'm not, you know, I don't want to lead you to believe that we're just kind of punting. It's such a hard problem. We're not trying to reduce the risk. But I would just say from an agency perspective, if there was an obvious set of things that should be done right now, I'm kind of thinking the groups that are here would be doing it. You know, we are incented to do that. That's the problem. So I hope that addresses the question.
Okay. Yes, thank you for that answer. And Mr. Livingood, you mentioned that Comcast that is an active participant on the FCC's Communication Security, Reliability, and Interoperability Council. So could you just describe for us how you envision the councils contributing to the improvements in cybersecurity, especially with respect to the types of attacks that the council is addressing, botnets, internet route hijacking, domain name fraud, et cetera?
Sure. There are a number of working groups. I'm on one. One of the folks that works for me, Mike, here, is a chair of one of them. And they focus on things like the security of the routing infrastructure, DNSSEC, and a whole range of other things. And I think that, you know, that's a process that works pretty well. People voluntarily get involved, and they work together on what they think the current best practices are. And that's a process that repeats regularly every year, so that it's not static and it's not sort of, you know, in 2008, we came up with some best practices, and that's what we're still focused on. It's something that gets renewed and refreshed all the time, and so it can look at every new threat as it comes out. And that's one of many places that we all work together. There are lots of others. The North American Network Operators Group, Messaging Anti-Abuse Working Group, a whole range of others, other acronyms that I could go on for minutes about. But I think groups like that are good because they're consensus-based, they're voluntary, and they're focused on best practices and really current issues.
Okay, and while your customers are mainly using your service for in-home computers, they also use the Wi-Fi networks and cellular networks to access Comcast email and other Comcast video products. So how do you continue to ensure the same cybersecurity protections you develop for your core services extend to these uses as well?
So a number of our security protections are things that a customer can download and install on their device, like their home computer. But we have a bunch of things that are in our network, like our Constant Guard system, which is a bot intelligence and other security threat system. And that's there for customers that might just be bringing a device into their network. Maybe it's a friend that's visiting their house and they're on their Wi-Fi network, and they happen to talk to, say, a botnet. We'll see those kinds of things. And so, we can alert customers to that. So whether they've installed software that we provided on their device or not, we still have tools in the toolbox to identify that and help them, tell them about it and help to solve it.
Okay. Mr. Amoroso, you stress the need to foster information sharing, and we've talked about that a bit here, but a lot between the government and private industry, as well as among private companies. What protections do you think are necessary to protect civil liberties and consumer privacy? And what do you believe would be the reasonable boundaries to liability protections and antitrust exceptions?
Well, the issues you raised are the reason we have those impediments now. Because I'm an American. I want civil liberties. I want all those things. So that's the current state, that we've swung the pendulum in the direction of making absolutely certain that we're protecting civil liberties. That's a good thing. So the question is, how do we somehow preserve those liberties and also allow all of us to know if there's some malware thing? I really think we got to figure that one out. I'm not sure I can give you a real good answer on how we do it, but I think it's got to be a pretty high priority, because the motivation, everybody's head shakes and goes, yeah, if there's malware, that's not really a civil liberties issue. Comcast should know that blah, blah, blah is a problem, and they can code that into their system. So somehow we just have to maybe get the lawyers out of the room and come up with some kind of a common sense approach. But that's the reason. All the things you listed, that's why we can't take those signatures today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Christensen. Dr. Amoroso, you should have seen the people shake behind you when you said get the lawyers out of the room. Let's go to Mr. Bass from
Thank you very
New
much,
Hampshire.
Mr. Chairman. I have a couple questions for Mr. Livingood, but before I ask those questions, can I ask a mobile or smartphone question for dummies? Why is there a difference in cybersecurity issues between an iPad or a smart device like this and a laptop or desktop computer? Make it quick, because I want to ask some other questions. Does anybody answer that question for me?
Well, there's probably a firewall between your PC at work or something. You're on a wired LAN, so we can do more filtering and policy control. With your wireless, you go direct to us, to the ISP, and we've been incented and led, particularly in Washington, push the packets, don't look at them, don't do anything, don't impose policy. God forbid you impose any kind of policy or filtering or throttling, so we do nothing. So your connection for wireless is directly to the internet, whereas your wired connection probably has some IT group at work.
So is this unit here exposed to bots, and is there a cybersecurity issue associated with my iPad?
Yeah, I don't know what you're connected to, but yeah.
Well, let's say I'm connected to Comcast, which is what I am connected to.
Yeah, there sure are those issues, and I think those are a new class of device, and a lot of the hackers and other criminals, they're very focused on return on investment. They're focused where the biggest platforms are, and so the more that those devices get out there, the bigger target that makes, and so they'll see, okay, I can spend a couple of days developing this, and I've got a few million devices. So you'll start to see more and more of those things, and depending upon the tablet that you have, some are more vulnerable at the moment than others. But that's something that a lot of Americans are buying, and so that'll be the next threat. it'll be those types of
Who's
tablets and mobile
responsible?
devices.
Is Apple responsible for this, or are you?
Well, I think it's a variety. So I think with that device, it's Apple plays a role. With the Android devices, Google plays a role, and then all the software vendors that make the apps that go on that play a role. But there's also a component of customer education, and I'm sure over time, you know, just as in the same way that we have software that runs on PCs to provide security, you know, that's going to start to develop and evolve for tablets and provide that extra level of security as well. We're just, I think, at the early stages of that adoption curve.
And the same is true for BlackBerry, right?
Well, I mean, all of the tablets are going to have different risks and different threats, and when we look at it in terms of how we protect our platform, but the theme that I keep hearing over and over, and I think it's one that this committee has really highlighted, is the need for education, right? And when you talk about computer security, one of the inevitable comparisons is to driving a car, right? And we don't let people drive a car without a license, but we let them get on the computer, connect to the internet, and download software without really understanding what those risks are. And that piece of education, I'm not suggesting we license people to use a computer, but we do need a level of sophistication and education in how we inform people of risks that they have when they connect a device to the
Fair enough.
internet.
I just want to ask a couple questions about the Constant Guard Protection Suite. I note in your testimony, Mr. Livingood, on page 6, it says, at Comcast, we understand that securing cyberspace is a complex task, so forth. Education, prevention, detection, remediation, and recovery are the core objectives of our anti-malware efforts. Does Comcast require its customers to download the Constant Guard Protection Suite? And if not, how is the customer going to know that it exists, and how are you going to notify them that they have a problem?
Mm-hmm. So it is not required that a customer download that to use our service. You know, they just have to have, you know, normal internet connectivity to do that. But we do a lot to make customers aware of that and to incent them to download it, both before they have an issue and after. So before they have an issue, you know, when they're installed, they're given a lot of information about the things that are available for them, and they're given links to that and so on. When they get a welcome email from us when they sign up for service, we're reiterating that for them. And we do a lot of things on our website and other places to promote the fact that these are available. Certainly after they have an issue and we notice it, we drive them to a remediation portal, and that's one of the first things that we recommend that they download is that suite and take a number of other steps. So we do a lot of education up front. We do a lot when they come on. We call it onboarding when they come on as a customer, and we do things while they're a customer to keep reiterating that and then afterwards.
Real quick, it's limited to Windows operating system, correct? How long has it been around?
That protection suite is pretty recent. I think that's a little bit more than a year. Okay. That's a supplement to a larger antivirus and security suite that we've had for many, many years that is co-branded.
And real quick, because I've run out of time, just a real, what business incentives, if any, did you get or did you have in developing and offering this service?
Well, we view it in two ways. Number one, there's a competitive incentive. If we can be seen as having more security features or more secure than the next guy, someone chooses us as their ISP rather than someone else. But the other thing is that, you know, customers, when they come on board as a customer, used to tell us that the two reasons were price and speed. And today it's price, speed, and security. So customers are very aware, increasingly so, not as aware as they need to be, but very aware these days about security. They ask us about those things when they call us up to order service. And so, you know, we view it as a competitive feature that we need to add, and that's why all of the things that we're doing as part of Constant Guard, DNSSEC, and other things are important to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now we go to Chairman Dingell for 5.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Gentlemen, we have much to do in little time, so I'm going to try to ask questions that you will answer yes or no to. Starting now with Mr. Livingood. Gentlemen, you all seem to be in agreement that imposing new federal cybersecurity regulations on industry would stifle innovation and harm industry's ability to protect consumers from cyber threats. Is that correct? Yes or no? Starting with you, Mr. Livingood.
Yes, I am concerned about that.
Mr. Amoroso? Yes. Sir?
Yes.
Sir?
Yes. Yeah, I think you've got consensus here.
Now, gentlemen, let us assume for a moment that the Congress will pursue the no regulation path in this matter and instead facilitate greater information sharing about cyber threats between industry and the government. Would that be your collective preference, yes or no?
Yes.
Sir?
Yes.
Yes.
Sir?
Yep, agreed.
Gentlemen, thank you. In that case, would the Congress need to consider granting exemptions to the antitrust laws and the Federal Trade Commission Act in order to allow the companies to share cybersecurity information amongst themselves? Yes or no?
Yes.
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 I unfortunately can't comment on that. I'm not
Very
familiar
good.
with that.
Now, gentlemen, similarly, do you believe that a safe harbor provision should be created in statute to permit companies to share serious cyber threat information with government agencies without fear of class action or other lawsuits being brought against them? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
The reporter doesn't have a nod button, sir, so you gotta say yes.
It's a
Or
yes.
no.
Okay.
Thank you. Sir?
Yes.
Sir?
I'm afraid I can't comment on that. I don't know.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Now, gentlemen, my last several questions have been premised on a no regulation scenario wherein the Congress adopts legislation to promote information sharing between industry and government. Would you please submit for the record what enforcement tools you believe the federal government would have in this scenario to ensure that industry is adequately guarding and being guarded against cyber threats? And I'm asking you to make a submission there for the record because of the shortness of time. Now, gentlemen, let us assume that the government would have some role in promoting cybersecurity in the private sector. If the federal government were to require the promulgation of cybersecurity standards, should such standards preempt state laws? Starting with you, Mr. Living, yes or no?
Yes. Easier to have one standard.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. I haven't really thought that one through.
And you, sir?
Yes.
Sir?
I'll have to agree with Dr. Amoroso. I haven't really considered that.
Yeah, and I can't comment on that either.
Now, gentlemen, I've read with some interest in Mr. Olson's testimony that, and I quote, the ongoing evaluation or Metro PCS's security program is based on periodic internal and third-party assessments and auditing. Would your respective companies object if such audits were government mandated? Yes or no?
No, we already provide all those things. Already do that.
I think we would object, yes.
Okay.
We object.
You would object?
Yes, we
All
would
right,
as well.
now, and then I'm going to come back and ask you to explain that. Next witness, if you please,
Yeah.
sir.
Go ahead. So, yeah, we'd probably object, but we do this
Okay.
anyway. We
So
already do that.
now, those who've indicated no, would you please explain briefly?
I can explain. When you write a law, we do paperwork. So I take people away from doing their day-to-day work to sit and do work. We have an ops lab, and one of our favorite things to show people in the ops lab is along one of the walls, we've got about a mile's worth of ring binders, and they always say, there's the government paperwork, followed by a lot of sort of chuckling laughter. But it's true. You know, we do have a great deal of paperwork that we fill out, you know, when we're dealing with different federal groups or Sarbanes-Oxley or whatever. There's a lot of paperwork. So I'm just suggesting that if we're already doing it and government comes in and says, I need you to fill out this compliance checklist, you're taking people away from the work to do paperwork. That's why we would object.
And
Does
very
anybody else
quickly,
have a
if
quick
I can just
comment?
if I can just make a note very quickly, I think this is the danger of sending an engineer sometimes. But I'm told that we might have objections. We would object and have the same concerns.
Gentlemen, thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your courtesy.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your questions. I think you got to the heart of the matter quickly. We now turn to the Chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and a very important member of our subcommittee, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for having the hearing. Thanks to the witnesses as well. And
I think one of the big problems that we run into in this is that we haven't really sounded the alarm bell. I think in all of the circles of people who look at this every day, all the security shops, the IT security shops across America, they know what the problem is. Average users don't see it. And that's why there's just no hue and cry, I think, yet about how we get this fixed. But I appreciate all your comments today. You talked about, each of you, about the importance of information sharing and keeping it as clean and simple as you can. Talk about how that would work. So if we bring the folks together, we're sharing a government secret sauce with you all, and you're sharing back malicious-ware that maybe the government's not aware of. Talk about how fast this is. There's a lot of talk about civil liberties, and I think people have this visual that people are reading email. Some guy, a guy named Bob in Cleveland, is reading everybody's email to find this malicious software. Not how it works. As a matter of fact, if that happens, it's a miserable failure. Can you talk just a little bit of how you envision that would work with this sharing arrangement, real time, no regulatory, all voluntary? Can you talk about that quickly?
Yeah, I'd be happy. First of all, I want to compliment you on your legislation. I think that there's some real nice elements in the work you've done. First of all, real time, absolutely. Independently auditable, I think, is important so that somebody can come in and look at the way this is done. But it also has to be controlled. Like blasting it out, over the internet would be a really bad idea. But I think you need to balance, right? This real time, but also the ability to come back and look at the process, make sure it's transparent without, like I said, exposing it to our adversaries. That's the right way to do it.
Yeah.
There's also different levels of sharing by industry. I think you have to look at how you do your risk assessments on each category that I previously described, but there's also right now a very good example out there of what's working well, and that's the defense industrial base pilot that's going on. That particularly is supporting defense contractors and DOD, but you can expand that to the financial services industry and other industries.
Anybody else want to take that? And just for clarification, when we talk about real time, I've seen numbers as high as 100 million a second, right? The packets of information flying around. So if this is going to work, right, the malicious source code has to be compared at an incredibly fast rate. Can you talk about that from an engineering perspective? Anyone? Anyone?
So I think one of the challenges is trying to do any kind of pattern matching. A lot of the malware that we see and have seen for a number of years is sort of what's called polymorphic, where it changes every individual instance of it is different from the next. So a lot of stuff changes. It's not like it is with anti-spam, where you can match on a few keywords or one file attachment. No, that's it. That's the target, and flag it that way. So you need to come up with ways, and a number of us, have systems like this, and there's others that are in development that can do this on a wider basis. But that is the very challenge that you're getting at, which is doing that in real time. It's just incredibly difficult, and you're at the edge of computer science at that point.
Yeah. Which is why I think many of you have told us before the legislation was written, be careful about the regulatory scheme. If we slow you down, if we give you another row of books down your mile-long hallway there, it doesn't work. I mean, we already have outdated what you're trying to accomplish in the room. And this is a value added not only for you, but for the government, is it not? I mean, the government also gets benefit from the protection of all of your great work in the private sector, correct?
No, and that's correct. And there are two things that I think that raises that are interesting. One is, by the time that a very prescriptive law would be written, by the time that ink was dry, the threats would have moved on. And so you've got to be able to be flexible. The other is that we all need to have, with our software developers and security specialists, they need to be hard at work in a room, not with half a room full of lawyers with them, slowing them down and asking questions about, why you're doing this and that. They need to be at work every day trying to solve this problem.
And I have to say, for the record, this may be my favorite panel of all time since I've been in Congress. Never so often have a group of engineers belittled lawyers at the table. You have warmed my heart today that we have faith that we're moving forward. I wish we had time to talk about all the issues. I'm very curious about how you would fix the programming issue. Huge problem for us as we move forward. We didn't talk about exfiltration, which is very difficult for any of you to catch, which I would argue right now is the single greatest threat to our economy moving forward. aside of the things that we know today. All of those things.
Gentlemen,
Yeah.
could you outline exfiltration?
Sure. It is, we know that nation states today are engaged in getting onto your network, lurking. They'll be there for a very long time. That you don't know it, your system administrators don't know it. These folks can't catch it. Sometimes the government, well, a lot of times the government can't catch it either. And then they'll latch onto that intellectual property that is on everybody's computer today, right? All those designs, everything that's of value to that company. And at the right time, at the right speed, they latch onto it and run like heck through your network and take it back. And we know a country like China who is investing in this as a national strategy to exfiltrate intellectual property and then directly use that intellectual property to compete against United States businesses. And unfortunately, it is happening at a breathtaking pace. And what's concerning is these folks are looking for malicious software that's disruptive or theft-oriented. This is very sophisticated, as sophisticated as any you'll see, and incredibly hard to detect. And they really don't want to break anything. They want to get in and steal it without you knowing it. And that's what is so troubling about it. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of jobs lost every year for the theft of that intellectual property that's being reprogrammed commercially against U.S. companies. This is as big a problem as I have ever seen, and it is one of the things that keeps, of the many, that keeps me up at night, Mr. Chairman. So thanks for letting me explain it. And it's something we didn't really get into today because that's really not the focus of what they can even watch. So that's why this information sharing, I think, is so important. It would help American businesses by the federal government having information of being able to identify that code, share it with the right partners. Amazing what we would be able to stop.
With the indulgence of the committee members, perhaps, given the importance of that topic, you could each just, if you have anything you want to add on that area, I'm sure, then we'll go to Mr. Stearns and Mr. Gingrey, but does anybody want to comment on what the chairman?
I will. It's called the Advanced Persistent Threat, and he's got it exactly right. It's somebody targeting any of you. Like if we know the folks that you run around with, we can craft a fake email. It looks pretty realistic. Points you to one of these websites that establishes a tunnel. It drops a remote access tool on your PC. You know how you log in to when you do remote access from work or from home or wherever you're doing it? This is the hacker now doing remote access to you. You're now the server, and once they're on, they can troll around your PC, your network, and so on, and the intellectual property theft has become significant. It is probably the #1 thing, I'll bet all of us, you know, when we go back. We talk about botnets here, and we talk about DNS, but that's not what we deal with when we go back to the office. We're dealing with APT, which is kind of our point, right? We're ahead of the discussions here are things that we've been dealing with in the past, and the things we deal with now are probably things we'll be here testifying about 5 years from now. So that is an issue.
Yeah, and just to echo Dr. Amoroso, like the advanced persistent threat, I mean, these are remarkably sophisticated adversaries. They are slow, they are patient, they will lurk on your network for years. And, you know, I'm from our Canadian headquarters. We had a large company go out of business, Nortel, and a part of the attribution of that is a loss of their intellectual property to a foreign state-level adversary, you know, ciphering secrets right off their network. So when you look at that, this is a serious concern. As Ed mentioned, 5 years from now, you'll probably be looking at that. That's how advanced they are. It's great that you're looking at it now, Congressman, because the threat is real. It's persistent today. And as you stated, it is a threat to jobs, and it's an economic threat to the United States and elsewhere.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. John. Can I just, for the record, thank Mr. Mahan for his 30 years of FBI service as well. Thank you for all the time you put on the target, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you'd think Rogers was a former FBI agent himself. Let's go to Mr. Stearns now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me take my questions a little bit along the lines that my colleague from Michigan talked about when he talked about advanced persistent threat. Dr. Amoroso, when you did your opening statement, you were speaking quite eloquently, talking about malicious software, malware you talked about. And you painted this picture that the malware itself, you were impressed how well it was developed, put together, and you sort of alluded to the fact that it was almost not unpenetratable, but it was to the point you were respectful of it, and we're not sure we were keeping up. Is that my interpretation of what you said?
That's exactly right. We're definitely not keeping up. We're trying. And think of the dizzying pace of innovation that you see out in Silicon Valley, right? I mean, new things every day. The hacking and the malicious adversary community, they're moving at the same pace. So the job we have is we've got to keep up. And you would say, hey guys, you better be ahead of them. Like, not even enough to just kind of keep up. You better be ahead. So we're always going to be sort of biased.
So you're
to
saying
say,
you're always
let us
catching
go
up.
faster. We've got to innovate. We've got to go faster.
Is that true? You think you're always catching up then?
That is
that's
absolutely
what you
true.
implied to me by saying the respectability you had for this malware.
Yes.
Is this true for adware, spyware, grayware, all these others? Is it also applicable to that too?
Yeah, APTs are the best, right? I mean, APTs, this exfiltration point that the congressman spoke about, that is the elite kind of attack vector in 2012.
Okay.
Spyware, maybe not so much.
Now with the malware, who are these people that are doing this specifically? Can you name them?
I can. I'm not in law enforcement. Maybe, but you might have.
Is there
some
anybody
people
on
here
the panel
who can, but
when Dr. Amoroso talked about this malware so respectfully and how eloquently it's put together? Is there anybody who can tell me who we're talking about?
I think if you take a look at the most recent investigation conducted by the FBI on the DNS malware, changer malware, you'll see that was a group of individuals operating out of Estonia that basically sent malware to individuals in various forms and emails, and you clicked on it, and it infected your computer in a way that it directed you when you went out to do a DNS type search. You were looking for, I don't know, Amazon.com or some other company. You really went to their servers, and their own servers were actually embedded in various locations in the United States. So these are organized groups. They've figured out how to capitalize on the money you can make with the malware.
Are these people, for example, in Estonia, are they part of a mafia, underground, a organization? It's larger than just in Estonia without you revealing any?
These are no longer just individual hackers. The individual hackers are out there, but now they've actually formed themselves into types of federations to work together.
Across the world?
You can do it across the world. There are certain hacking groups you can join and be a member from different countries.
So it's like a fraternity. You say, well, I'm a member of the Estonia hacker
Estonia
group.
just seems to be a hotbed right now, and I
Hotbed.
think because of how the economy is run over there.
Anyone else?
If I could add to that, I think
Sure.
it's actually pretty interesting. This is a very large and very well organized underground economy. They are specialized, so you have some people that write tools, other people that rent access to bot networks. So you can rent botnets by the hour. You can tell them where you want the bots to be, what kind of computers. All of payment network mechanisms between these parties. So it's very sophisticated. And if you think about from a criminal standpoint, it's a lot easier to do get a return on investment, this type of thing, than it is to go out and do physically oriented sort of crimes. And the scale is so much larger. These are folks that operate across borders internationally, and there's just an enormous amount of economic incentive for them to do it. And it's primarily, unlike APT, at least in some respects, this is primarily an economic crime. APT is focused certainly on economics, but more on intellectual property or embarrassing companies. This is all about the money.
Well, I guess, Mr. Mahon, is there a possibility that we have terrorists involved with this that are part of this Estonia? The terrorists could go to this group or this federation across and are using them? Is that high
Absolutely.
probability?
Terrorists use these types of schemes for funding. Number one, they need funding for their operations. And number two, they use it just as a communication system. They know they're being looked at. So the ways that they need to communicate are surreptitiously in a manner that they can't be intercepted. So they use these types of technologies to communicate with one another. But they have to fund their operations.
I guess the basic question comes down to, and this is probably the premise or the understanding what this hearing is all about, what could we as legislators on this subcommittee or the full committee or members of Congress, what can we do to make it easier for you to operate and at the same time give you the wherewithal to compete and what should we not do? What should we do and what should we not do? And I just, as a closing statement, Mr. Livingood, if we just go down the panel and each give what we should do and what we should not do, that'd be helpful for as one legislator.
Sure, of course. I think what you should do is help make information sharing easier, remove those impediments. I think also there's a role for government to play in education, whether that's PSAs or other things, to raise awareness about security issues. And I think that there are R&D types of things through agencies that you can help fund to focus on this. I think what you should not do is focus on mandates and compliance. That enables us to focus instead on innovation.
Wow, that sounded good. I would exactly repeat those comments. I'll add one additional, and that's that you do have some influence around the federal procurement process, right? So, a lot of times we see procurements come out, and we scratch our heads and say, boy, don't you think there ought to be, like through GSA, there's this MTIPS program. A lot of us are MTIPS vendors. There ought to be more business. There isn't. So I'd recommend that procurement process ought to be the most secure process in the entire world.
I would echo what both of them said and just add the importance of information sharing. We have limited resources. We conduct risk assessments. That risk assessments, when we're trying to decide on impacts and probability of events, is based upon the information we have at the time. If a government agency or another carrier has additional information and we don't factor that into our analysis, we're really misaligning our resources and how we develop our countermeasures.
I think there's a lot of commonality among the panel here on what we'd like to see. I think just to add a little bit to the information sharing area, I think the federal government has access to information through various agencies that are watching the country's cyber borders, and we've seen in our own company the vast majority of reconnaissance scans and attempts to gain access are coming from China and Eastern Europe. And I think the federal government would be in a good position to monitor and provide more information on that.
Yeah, and going last, I get to say I agree with everybody else on the panel here. Especially, I want to hammer that information sharing from government to industry. The purview that intelligence agencies have and that you have at a state level in terms of what you see is much different than what we see. So my team works with Dr. Amorosa's team on areas of commonality between RIM and AT&T where we think we have issues that need to be addressed that impact the security of our customers. But we don't necessarily get that feedback from the government about what do you see that we need to be aware of. And if there's anything I could ask for, it's a more transparent, more real-time information sharing mechanism to let industry know what government knows so that we can act to protect our networks and by extension, protect your information.
Thank you. Mr. Gingrey, thanks for your patience. As we've gone through the hearing, you're the last batter up.
Mr. Chairman, now you took the words right out of my mouth. I think you are exacting the last measure of patience out of the last member to ask a question. But I moved down here early in the hearing, as all of you know, because I couldn't hear very well, even though the chairman said speak right into your microphones. But I'm glad I did move down close because I knew it was going to be interesting. I knew that you, all five of you experts, were going to have a lot of useful information to present to us. And quite honestly, after 2 hours of this, I'm trying to figure out a way to beat these guys, and the only thing I can think of is an opportunity to invest in these hacking operations. I don't guess that would be legal, but if it were, I think that would probably be one of the best ways for us to win. But thank you all very much. Let me ask a couple of specific questions, and maybe this cuts a little bit to the chase of one of the main reasons why the chairman is holding this hearing. In each one of you, please, starting with Mr. Livingood, answer this for me. Do you believe the FCC has enough cybersecurity expertise to allay the concerns that some industry stakeholders have with the Commission if they do choose to impose cybersecurity regulations on you guys, on the network providers? Do you have enough confidence in their expertise to do that, Mr. Livingood?
So I don't know the answer to that. We work with a lot of folks at the FCC and enjoy doing that. They have a lot of expertise. Whether they have enough here, I think that's a tough question. I don't know the answer.
I've said earlier, I don't think there's any agency that has the right expertise to do that. If we knew what the answer was, we would be doing it. So I don't think it's a knock on any one particular agency. I just don't think there's any agency that has that capability right now.
Mr. Mahan?
And I would agree with Ed. The answer is no, but I don't think anyone does. And I think that is the importance of collaborative relationships. You do need to bring people in from all sorts of the federal arena as well as the private industry arena to work together due to just the evolving nature of the threats in this arena.
Mr. Olson?
Yeah, it's an important question, but I'd have to agree with Mr. Livingood. I don't know whether they do or not.
Mr. Tulsky?
Yeah, I don't actually know either. I think what you're hearing here, and it's common amongst the panel, is the defender job, the job that we're trying to do to protect your information, is exceptionally hard, and it's actually much more difficult than being on the other side. So
Boy,
where that expertise comes from.
Speaking of hedge funds, let me go back to Mr. Olson and your formal testimony that you gave. You talked about the clearinghouse. I would like to know a little bit more about that specifically, and do you think that would be helpful? And maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I think there's really two aspects to that. One is where the federal government is sharing with private sector, with industry, what they're seeing as far as threats. And I mentioned a little while ago about the threats from outside the U.S., so I think that's a critical component. The other is where companies could share, private companies could share information on threats that they're seeing, and that clearinghouse would have to be sponsored by somebody, and I think the federal government is really the right place to do that.
And I think you addressed also in your testimony the whole harmless provision that would be necessary to share that information so that you wouldn't be subject to lawsuits and that sort of thing.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I've got a little time left. Let me have one more question then. The internet is currently transitioning from this internet provider V4 to V6 addressing. Does that process create any new cybersecurity issues, and will transitioning alone solve any cybersecurity issues that currently exist? Does the process of transitioning present opportunities to resolve existing cybersecurity issues? We'll start with Mr. Livingood and just go right down.
Sure. So I think, we've been a leader on IPv6. I think that all of those issues that exist in the current internet in IPv4 simply carry over to IPv6. It's just a new form of addressing. That being said, because it's a new form of addressing and a new technology, you're introducing new things into the ecosystem. To Dr. Amos's point earlier, it's a complex ecosystem. When you change something, it can have unintended consequences. And so it's something that you have to keep an eye on and make sure that you're not introducing any new vulnerabilities. But I think that if there were any, it's simply because some security tool that worked great in IPv4 might not have all the same features.
Dr. Amoroso.
Every device on the planet running V6, in theory, would be addressable, would be routable, and that's a pretty dangerous situation. So for all of us, we've got to figure out how to architect security protections around that. So I do have some concerns about the V6 transition.
Mr. Mahan?
Yeah, the architect and engineering teams are still working through those, but as they've said, you have legacy systems being married up with new evolving technology, and whenever you do that, you're gonna have things evolve as you begin to deploy it.
Mr. Olson?
I think from a protection standpoint, I think it's a step ahead, but the bad guys are out there working just as hard as we are to find another way around that. So as soon as we make an advancement in technology, they're right out there keeping pace with us.
And finally, Mr. Totsky.
Yeah, and this just, as Ed said, expands the attack surface, and by doing so increases the risk. So we have new and unknown risks that we're going to have to figure out how to mitigate.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your generosity of those 45 extra seconds, and I'll yield back.
Actually, you got clear to 49, but I'm glad to help. Thank you, Mr. Gingrey, for staying and participating. I want to thank all of our witnesses and all the folks behind them who I'm sure played some role, but we really appreciate your insights. It's very helpful in our effort. Obviously, we're trying to do the right thing. You're out there fighting the battle every day, and we don't want to get in your way. And so we may be back to you with our working group, digging a little deeper on some of these issues and getting as specific as possible. We're hope to look out too at some of the other types of networks and small providers. I mean, you obviously represent major providers or a representation of them. We're also wondering about the weakest link, which might be small ISPs, and how do they deal with this, and do they have the same sorts of capabilities to fight back? And so anyway, I deeply appreciate your willingness to be here today and share your knowledge with us. We're better for it. So with that, the Subcommittee on Communications Technology stands adjourned.